My name, as stated, is Leomile Mufutanyana, and I am your program director for the day. Today's presentations are on the future of conservation management, and we have a group of really interesting and remarkable speakers. Before getting into our presentation, just a few ground rules. Please, when you join or as you're settling into joining the link, please ensure that your mic as well as your camera is switched off. We currently have a Judith that has their camera on. Ma'am, could you please switch off your camera? And then from that point, should you have any comments, questions, you're more than welcome to please post them in the chat box and as well as raise your hand. Your hand. In addition to that, just be on the lookout in the chat box. There will be a registration link for today's session that you can use, just a 2-minute registration. Getting right into it, I have two guests from Love, as well as Ms. Mapole Loke. Professor Kumar Pavlov is a dedicated associate professor and chartered engineer in the Civil Engineering Surveying Department of the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Bellville campus. With a rich tapestry of experiences and commitments to excellence, Dr. Pavlov has made significant contributions to academia, research, and community engagement. Prof. Kumar's academic journey is marked by excellence, graduating with honors cum laude in civil engineering in 2001 and achieving the 10th university rank for geotechnical society. His insatiable thirst for knowledge led him to complete a PhD in civil engineering with a specialization in structural engineering. Ms. Loke is a candidate engineering technologist registered with the Engineering Council of CIS, currently enrolled as for a doctoral degree in civil engineering structures at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. She is an academic, published author of a number of research papers with key focus on sustainable restoration of heritage materials. Her work experience includes construction supervision of various civil engineering projects, including construction material analysis, water, sanitation, and roadworks. Ms. Loke's research work focuses on the sustainable, compatible restoration of the Castle of Good Hope, Robben Island precinct martyrs. Her contribution to the conservation of South African heritage expands to her contribution in the Robben Island Museum strategic research agenda and participation in the material visual assessment of the National Assembly after the fire incidents. With those accolades, I'd like to present my two speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me share my screen. So today my presentation will be on the work which we are carrying at CPUT, and in collaboration with Sahara. They are partners since 2018, and the journey has started with the coffee, and now we are here with some of the work which we did very well with them. So today's work is like we did some of the NDT testing, and that tells you about knowing the health of your structures, and case studies on non-parallel manor house. And we have recently opened a sustainable heritage research unit in collaboration with Sahara at CPUT to take up more research on that. So the presentation is like background, motivation, methodology, results and discussion, conclusions and recommendations. So as we all aware of Sahara, they take care of structures and sites in South Africa with pointing towards grade 1, grade 2 and grade 3 classifications, in which grade 1s take care of national significance site, then grade 2 provincial and then local significance sites. So motivation is behind, like we have so many heritage structures around the world, and they need to be protected in order to uh, take care, or you can say that in order to see or protect them for our future generation, and even to look for that how our ancestors and the engineers during those times has built such a significant structures. So as you see, they faces a lot of uh, problems during the time. It's sometimes the fire, sometimes the war, and yes, sometimes some uneven climate effect or environmental effect this occurs. So the motivations I have just pointed out is the heritage structures are subjected to increased weathering and decay. Natural disasters, climate change, war, fire damage, human interference, and all contributes to the problem. And there are several traps to determine the structural stability of the heritage structures. And we need some urgent intervention to develop suitable method in order to preserve them. So this is a non-peril manor house, which is in Dal Joseph Fort, and you see the location has been shown here for the knowledge of that site. And this is the present condition. If you see after the fire of 2019, the top roof has not been there, and still the structure is not in proper shape right now. So definitely we need some conservation techniques in order to preserve such heritage structures of grade 1. So this is the non-parallel manor front gable in 2016, and if you see top portion is not there. And if you see, this is trace pet of Pierre Ferrell, granted in 1694, and the ownership passed to Sam Gilbert Hugo in 1804. And yes, still the danger mark is there because of its structural instability, and it's also birth place of Afrikaan due to the efforts of Prince Fear Regate Afrikaners during 19th century, and site of Nelson Mandela release from 27 years of imprisonment. So this is quite significant site, and yes, these needs to be some restoration and protection for those sites. So these are the different types of the gables which were constructed during those period by Dutch, and it is a significant example of Dutch architecture. So we did some of the survey over there and visual inspection, and we carried out uh, like cracks and other aspect, and see what is the wall thickness, etc. And further, we try to not damage the structure. We just did non-destructive testing that doesn't hurt the structures, or we don't take any core of it. Just we, with the modern technologies, or you can say modern equipment, we try to just assess it by only impounding some waves or some in it. So this is the method which we adapted. We did some of the lab tests in order to have good collaboration, correlation between the NDT and lab test. So we did visual inspections, we did rebound hammer, we did ultrasonic pulse. These are all non-destructive tests. We did compressive strength test, and we also measured the density, whatever the brick we found it nearby. So we drawn that wall, and if you see, the wall is not symmetrical about it. It has almost on the left hand side we have 7 meter, and then we have a central gable of about 6 meters, and then we have another 7.88 meters of right hand gable. So all the dimensions and other things has been marked. We haven't touched the top part of this gable because of its out of plane behavior, like it is coming out, so we doesn't want to hurt that one. So we selected in the entire stretch, we selected the points, and if you see, we did all the NDT tests on these circle, which is a rebound hammer test, and we also did ultrasonic pulse test to just see, uh, evaluate its material properties. So as I show you, this is coming out of plane right now, and it is not wise to touch that part of the structure, because initially the roof was there and it's tried to hold the top gable, but right now the roof is not there, so hence this part of the structure came little bit out of plane from the original one. So we got some of the brick, which we try to do some destructive test on that in order to correlate with the NDT1, and we established the correlation between the rebound hammer values and the compressive strength of that wall. So that is a very good property in order to evaluate the health of the structures. So we try to correlate with our NDT values. So we have almost 7 samples, and we try to establish that correlation with that. So even we also, with the help of UPV test, we conducted to measure the cracks, and these are the identified cracks which you can see, and its width has been measured like 2 mm and 3 mm is the maximum one on the central gable. And similarly on the right hand side of the gable, we have measured the depth of this using UPV. So these are the compressive strength around the wall, and we plotted the entire compressive strength. So if we see this wall, the minimum strength of 3.30 was found at the bottom of this, and even close to so these are like a weaker section in the structures, and if you see, the strongest part of the section is on the right hand side, that is 9.26, and then you have a central portion as 11.23 and 10.53 megapascal. We also calculated its Young's modulus and Poisson's ratio that help us to know much more about like its mechanical property of this wall, which help us to analyze it more accurately in order to know where the wall is not good. So we also, it shows the behavior of uh, longitudinal strain versus lateral strain. Similarly, we also got the Young's modulus, and you see this right hand portion is quite less, that is 4.399, and we have highest Young's. So we also measure the depth of the crack, the one which we found it, and we use our UPV test. So if you see, these are the location and the maximum crack depth, that is almost equal to the wall width, is 622 mm. So at this location at CD9, I think the wall is entirely cracked throughout the depth of the wall. So this gives a fair idea that what is the state of the wall at this particular junction. So this is also plotted along with this, and if you see this along with the strength of the wall, so that gives a fair idea of it. So that gives a fair idea of it. So in conclusion, I will just tell that there is a significant gap in the heritage structures research, and definitely degradation of these heritage site amplify the damage in the structure. So they need to repair, or they need to be checked within like time to time, We need to adapt some methodology in order to have like yearly. We need to check the health of all these structures, and we need some immediate conservation in this regard. So these are the like we are also modeling in the finite to like put some heritage conservation education. We need to do almost comprehensive assessment of all these structures, and definitely need a interdisciplinary collaboration, and some of the solution plan need to be in place while we are looking into all these structures. So definitely for the like next 5 years, what are the priority for all these structures we need to set up with all these research what we are doing at fundings for the master's dissertation, and I also acknowledge non-panel site manager for their assistance. So thank you very much. I just want to say that preserving the past is not just about safeguarding building, but about safeguarding the stories, the memories, and the essence of who we are as a civilizations. Thank you very much. I think the next part of presentation is given by our doctoral student, Ms. Mapole, and she is very much in-depth study of design and development of heritage mortar, which will help to restore these structure quite well with some authentic, you can say, materials. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we can answer it after Ms. Papole's talk. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Anytime you're ready. Projecting shortly and starting her presentation. It's okay, I can listen.
Good morning, colleagues. I'll get straight into it. So my research is based on the design and development of heritage mortars for restoration purposes. With the case studies being Robben Island, buildings on Robben Island, and the Castle of Good Hope. This is just the content of my presentation. So the first question is, why do we design compatible restoration mortars? Why do we have to design these mortars? So basically, it's just for protection and restatement of represented culture and history for future generations. So these structures represent history, so we need to preserve them for future generations. And also, we do this for proper restoration interventions for restoration. So as we can see on figure 1, our heritage structures are going through a number of deterioration, either caused by human beings, either natural disasters, or literally just aging because they have been existing for quite some time. So this is just an example of what happened to our National Assembly, which is part of the heritage site. And these are some defects on Robben Island buildings due to aging. So our research has found out that there's insufficient guide for mixed design during the selection of a suitable mortar. Yes, there's positive results from general research, results on material characterization, but such results are yet to be proven for their compatibility and durability in application. There's also lack of proper step-by-step design and production guide for future restoration practitioners. This is in relation to designing the compatible heritage mortars. So another aspect that we found to be missing in research in general is that different categories of mortar which perform differently on the structure. By this, I mean the plaster, the render, the bonding mortar, and some floor mortar. There's no differentiation between how do we design each and every category of mortar. Another gap that we found is that, yes, the South African national standards, which are the standards responsible for construction works, they are more addressing the cement-based materials, but not much about the heritage mortars, which are in most cases lime mortars. So due to this gap, it was found that majority of the restoration projects just opt for any available materials, not taking into account the previously used materials. So we have been having advancements and evolution in construction materials. Back then, they were using earth mortars. They moved from earth mortars to Roman cements and Roman mortars. And now, currently, we are using Portland cement. But the question is, are these materials suitable for our heritage structures? Which, in most cases, they are not. So, another aspect that we've realized is that heritage restoration there's a myth that it's for historians, it's for archaeologists, but now what about engineers, which are people with more knowledge when it comes to buildings as a whole, construction? What about structural engineers, geologists, scientists, and also environmentalists, and so on? So our mandate is to include the industry as well. By industry, we mean people who produce these materials. We need their involvement into producing the suitable materials, and also our communities, which play a major role, because we could be preserving these heritage sites, but if there's vandalism, if there's theft, I heard in previous days such issues were addressed during this webinar. So it is important to involve everyone into this heritage conservation. So the objectives of my research include the following. The first one is to characterize the three era materials, which is materials from the 1600s, from the Castle of Good Hope, some materials from the 1700 era and 1800 era that will come from Robben Island buildings, and characterize them physically, chemically, mineralogically, in order to find the original materials that were used on these buildings. And also to develop the compatible ready-to-use mortars using a set mixed design. So I'm investigating such mixed design for heritage mortar restoration. And also to investigate and verify the compatibility and durability of the design mortars. So my mandate is not just to produce these mortars, is to also project and see how long these mortars will take, how well do they behave when exposed to certain environmental conditions and all that. Also to compare the original and the new heritage mortar properties for extended lifespan of our heritage masonries. So after producing the materials, I will carry on into assessing their durability and comparing with the original materials. So this is the summary of the methodology that I'm using. I have two phases. The first phase involves characterizing the original materials. Like I said, the aesthetics play a major role into tourism attraction and all that. So the first phase involves characterizing these materials aesthetically, physically, chemically, and mineralogically. After now obtaining the results as to what was used for construction of these materials in terms of mortar, the second phase involves now designing new mortars. So it involves sourcing the raw materials that are suitable or compatible with the originally used materials, and then developing such materials. So a standard procedure will be developed in this regard as a guide for future restoration projects. So the second phase 2B, involves, after producing these mortars, now we have to test their compatibility. Are they compatible with the original mortars in terms of the aesthetics, physical, chemical, and mineralogical? Afterwards, we have to test their durability. Are these materials durable? Will they last? So in all this methodology, we'll be using the European standards, the RILAM recommendations, like I said, the South African national standards are lacking in this regard. So we'll incorporate these others, and where applicable, we use the South African national standards. So this is just a summary of that methodology. We sampled gently, picking some mortar samples from these two test sites, ensuring that we do not cause damage on the fabric. So we sampled the materials, and then we obtained an export permit from NADA in Spain, whereby we carried most of our experiments. The experiments involved testing the color of the original mortars and the color durability tests, which involved salt crystallization to see how our mortars behave when exposed to factors such as sea spray, considering that both structures are very close to the ocean, and also seeing that there's change in how the weather changes are very. There's a huge weather changes recently, so we need to know how our materials behave when exposed to extreme temperatures, whether too hot or too cold. So in that regard, that was part of the durability tests that we did. So we got some results, which according to our analysis, we realized that the new mortars, definitely the color of the new mortars, even though it meets the chemical composition, the mineralogical composition, but there's a color difference, which we need to work around. This is obvious, as if you've seen on some sections on the castle, there are sections which are a bit lighter on the wall, meaning such sections were recently restored. So we're trying to avoid such instances whereby we have different colors on one section. But it is worth noting that so far we can say the restoration projects that happened on our heritage sites are very impressive. That can be proven by the existence of these structures even today. So one other aspect that we tested was the porosity. As we might know, that porosity plays a major role into how a structure survives different water movement, how a structure breathes. So that's very important. So we characterized our original materials based on that. And then this is some experiments from the scanning electron microscopy, whereby it shows us the chemical composition of these mortars. I will not go into detail, but from this we can see a number of chemical elements present in our mortars. And this result will lead us into sourcing the new materials to be used for our new mortars. And some chemical compounds using X-ray fluorescence. So this results, as we can see, we have SiO2 and so on and so forth. So the results in this regard help us determine what type of binder was used to be sure. Yes, theory says lime was used for production of mortars before Portland cement was introduced. But this proves that indeed these materials were not built using Portland cement, but they were built using lime. So we found out that the type of lime that was used for construction of these two heritage sites was hydraulic lime. So after that, this whole project incorporates conducting different experiments, just so we are very sure that yes, this proves the first experiment proves the second one. So indeed, this is what was used. So our X-ray diffraction results indicated that some of the mortars at the castle were just earth mortars, which involved some bit of clay, kaolinite. And then from sample 1 to sample 6, our results indicated those were hydraulic lime-based mortars, which contained some bit of gypsum, some quartz, microcline, aragonite, some biotite here and there, and some calcite. So after that, we continued and carried out the TGDSC, whereby we were analyzing our mortar's behavior when exposed to heat. So these are different patterns on A, it's for the lime mortars. And then on B, it's for our earth motors. So different motors behave differently when exposed to heat. So this is what we obtained. In conclusion, we can just literally say these motors were made using hydraulic lime, and currently we have produced motors because of the absence of hydraulic lime in the industry. We are using hydrated lime, which we obtained from a local supplier. So we have produced such motors whereby we are analyzing their compatibility with the original materials. So this is some work we have published and presented on international stage. As we all know, it's South African heritage does not only involve South Africans, it's an international thing. As we all know, for example, the castle, it was built by the Dutch, the British occupied it. So it's presented some of our work on international platform whereby that alone attracts tourists, gets South Africa out there, and then our heritage known worldwide. We're also currently working with the Robben Island Museum, whereby we contributed to the built fabric of Robben Island that will be integrated into the fourth IMP. Some acknowledgements. I just wish to thank these organizations and people for contributing on this project. The African World Heritage Fund, Moses Mapesa Research Grant, they funded this project. Like I said, it's not just South African heritage, it belongs to the world. The Kingdom of Lesotho contributed also financially in supporting this project. Afrimat Lime also, which is us trying to engage the industry. They also provided some materials used. And then we are very grateful to Sarah for always opening their doors to us. The Castle and Robben Island Museum and staff, they have been very helpful in giving us access. The Center for Scientific Instrumentation at the University of Granada, and Ms. Kiara for her experimental work, and the research group at the same university. The Civil Engineering and Geomatics Department also has been very useful in helping us carry out experiments. I'll just have to thank Mr. Snell and Mr. Minis. We truly appreciate their support. That will be all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lokwe. We have now entered into some questions. I did see the comments going through. We have some comments in the chat box. There was a hand earlier and it disappeared. Can the person that once raised their hands please raise it once again? And from my side, I'll go through the comments. The first one is from Ben Mwasinga and it's for you, Prof. It's sale where they can be used for large restoration projects, for example, Parliament, and what will be required to achieve this? Oh, actually, it's for Mapole, pardon me. Sorry, can I read it? It's this. So ask about feasibility of producing these.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwasinga, for an interesting question. Yes, for now we are only doing this on a small scale, but the whole intention of doing this work is to raise awareness to say this is the process we need to do before we can carry out any restoration work. So it is indeed feasible and necessary to carry out such experiments for any heritage site before any restoration work can happen. So yes, it is feasible. Thank you.
Actually, had a similar question, which had to do with it seems as if research is trying to catch up with the realities with many more buildings. As that's great news. The second question, it's from Devin, and it says, "Thank you for a great In developing these mortars, will sustainability be considered in the future, the environmental impact of raw material production and in use, etc.? So basically speaking to the question of how sustainable is this for the environment?
Thank you so much. Based on these materials, for example, let's talk about lime, which was used originally. So my understanding is, like I said in my presentation, we're trying to involve all stakeholders. This means environmentalists as well. So my understanding is after producing these mortars, saying, okay, they are capable for use on the structures. Are they now environmentally friendly? Are they even environmentally like for long term? So our mandate is to involve the environmentalists as well, archaeologists, everyone who's involved in this whole process, so that we don't just look on the restoration side, but we look at the bigger picture. So it is important to involve such.
Would include actually acquiring the material, not just
Give a more elaborated form. Yes, whatever we are doing, like we are trying to establish those things based on the material which has been used.
okay.
So definitely those materials stay for, like you can say, 300 years, and still they are working on those structures. So we are trying to develop the similar kind of material, although we are using some of the modern techniques in them to improve it. Definitely those material will be sustainable for the use on those. And definitely we need some like industrial partner if we want to go for a scale up, and definitely the ratios and the proportions in go for restoration work. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Second last question, because I also would like to squeeze in my question. South Africa in creating a guidelines/handbook.
And that's a nice question, Ben. I think yes, I think to formulate process in order to analyze any structures. So as you've seen that we particularly did for a small wall, and definitely with your help, some of our honors students are going to do it for a Lutheran church as well, which they are going to start in the month of October. So if we have a sufficient data and other things, definitely we can propose.
Thank you, Prof.
Just to add on what Prof has said, uh, like I indicated before, that yes, the South African national standards are more into cement-based materials. So our mandate or our aim is to somehow contribute towards developing. Now, when you get to site and have to do the work, that's when the standards are lacking. So we want to contribute towards that. It's not an easy process. It's not a 2 months process. It will take time, but our end goal is to have now the standards that talk to heritage structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Floko. My last question is for you, Prof, and it mainly has to do with the monitoring that you spoke of that we do, and that monitoring is also part of the work that we do. So far, what has research indicated in terms of the frequency we should be monitoring some of these structures that we are worried about?
Yes, I think that is a very like for very important structure. Definitely, the monitoring is best solution in order to, uh, I think, stop them from the degradation, right? So we do the monitoring. I won't say that it should be a real time monitoring, but yes, it should be like monthly or you can say quarterly monitoring of these structures. So in order to assess them, and then based on that, those assessment, your restoration and other plans can be made on it. So definitely monitoring of these important structures are quite plays a vital role in like putting not like economical also, you can say. Once the structure is damaged, you need to put a lot of money to restore them back to that original thing. But if you monitor them, I think with the test, the real time monitoring is not justified because that is costly, but you can do the quarterly monitoring of these structures in order to protect them and preserve them.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Are there any more hands, questions, comments? Our guests are under a time crunch, as I believe. But in the absence of any hands, I would like to thank Ms. Suitability of our heritage structures. We look forward to seeing more and hearing more this type of research and, quite frankly, the practicality in the work that we do. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Having us.
Thank you. We are going to have a changeover as our guests leave us in the boardroom and as we prepare for our next guest. Just to note a change in our program, we have no speaker. Unfortunately, we've had to cancel that one on innovations in forensic pathology. Instead, we will have brains on sustainable heritage tool concept. Um, so we're gonna have that change over. Please continue to put your comments as well as your questions in the chat box. Our next speaker is our business development specialist here at SARA, Devin Devin Brains. I hope I'm saying that. Brains. Okay. Is a dedicated professional with a background in property studies, having earned his BSc honors degree from the University of Cape Town in 2019. He worked in property management and development for 2 years prior to joining SARA. He joined SARA in 2021 as the business development and property specialist, managing the business development. He is primarily responsible for optimizing SARA's property portfolio for income generation and developing core business income generating initiatives. Devon also plays a role in fostering strategic partnerships that align with SARA's financial growth and sustainability goals. That sounds like a very pressure-filled job. You may go ahead. Are you going to be projecting? Okay, cool. Please give me a moment. And projecting. So you have the floor.
Thank you so much. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Devin Brainers. As stated, I'm the business development and property specialist at SARA, and today I'll be speaking on the concept of the sustainable heritage tool. It's unfortunate that the other speaker couldn't make it today, but I think it's very fitting that my presentation follows that of Professor Pallav and Ms. Mapule. I think their presentation of closing those kind of gaps. So the concept of adaptive reuse in the context of heritage and the built environment. So firstly, what is a heritage building? Heritage buildings are those that have cultural significance, such as being of aesthetic, architectural, historical, scientific, social, and spiritual, linguistic, or technological value or significance. Years and older. So why is adaptive reuse important for heritage conservation? Adaptive reuse is the process of converting features. It is a crucial component of heritage conservation because it allows us to preserve our built heritage. Adaptive reuse include the following benefits in terms of revitalizing and regenerating urban areas, It can create jobs and stimulate the economy. It can reduce environmental impact by reusing existing materials for future generations. On screen here is an iconic example of adaptive reuse in South Africa. It's the Zait Museum of Contemporary Art, African Art in Cape Town. This is an historical grain silo complex that has now been adaptively reused and repurposed to be a contemporary art museum and a hotel. So this is a local example of adaptive reuse on quite a grand scale. So to understand kind of adaptive reuse, I think we should start with what is the business case for adaptive reuse of historic or heritage buildings in particular. And the business case for adaptive reuse and a slogan that I would like everyone to walk away with today is the greenest building is the one that already exists. This is made clear via a report produced of heritage buildings and how heritage and urban planning can be used. We need to look at those key findings of the Preservation Green Lab report. The findings are as follows. Fairly simple to understand that reusing buildings is better for the environment than demolishing them and building new ones. It can save a significant amount of energy, materials, and emissions compared to new construction. The study found that it can take up to 80 years for new energy-efficient buildings to overcome the climate change impacts created by its construction. When looking at scale, the study found that retrofitting just 1% of the city of Portland's office and single-family homes over the next 10 years would help to meet 15% of the USA's total CO2 reduction targets over the next decade, material use and emissions. When looking at new materials can reduce or even negate the benefits of reuse. So ultimately, minimizing new construction materials maximizes the benefit of adaptive reuse. When looking at the bottom line, the study found that reusing existing buildings can benefit the economy and the communities they are surrounded by, and ultimately the environment. At a time when foreclosure and unemployment rates remain high, communities would be wise to consider reusing existing buildings instead of demolishing them and building new ones. An example made to illustrate this point points to the historic rehabilitation 32-year track record of creating over 2 million jobs and generating $90 billion in private investment. In addition, the studies show that building reuse and rehabilitation creates 50% more jobs than new construction. So based on understanding adaptive reuse and its benefits, I'll now be speaking to how we can use this knowledge to change the built environment landscape within South Africa. Sustainable adaptive reuse is the process of converting existing buildings to new uses in a way that preserves the heritage value and reduces the environmental impact. This can benefit the environment and the economy and surrounding communities. So in this instance, SARA has a role to play by promoting sustainable adaptive reuse through developing a clear and consistent planning guidelines for adaptive reuse and educating the public about the benefits of adaptive reuse. The Green Building Council of South Africa, or the GBCSA, becomes a critical partner in achieving this as they play a role through promoting sustainable adaptive reuse by incorporating heritage conservation and adaptive reuse into their Green Star rating system and by celebrating successful adaptive reuse projects. For those of you who might not know who the Green Building Council is and what they do, you may have walked into a building before where you've seen a plaque stating that the building is a Green Star rated building and that they have a 4 or 5 star rating, which speaks to energy efficiency, water usage, and the materials used in the building's construction, and how the building operates and is managed. Celebrates heritage. I'll now speak to the how. How do we accomplish changing the built environment landscape through sustainable adaptive reuse? SARA, UCT's Urban Real Estate Research Unit, and the GBCSA have identified key components that would be considered to encourage sustainable adaptive reuse through the incentive of green credits and the recognition from the Green Building Council of South Africa. These components go above and beyond the Green Building Council's existing criteria, focusing on heritage conservation. The idea here is to create a leadership or innovation challenge to property developers and other stakeholders, which will earn them points or credits when certifying their building with the Green Building Council. So these were identified as follows. I'll give a brief description of each and what they relate to. The first of which is adaptive reuse excellence. This is looking at projects that pride themselves in creativity and innovation in repurposing heritage buildings. Regenerative heritage. This is looking at regenerative design principles within projects. Then inclusive community engagement. This is looking at prioritizing meaningful engagement with local communities. Then we're looking at the component of technical innovation in heritage conservation. This is looking at projects that will utilize advanced technologies and digital tools when it comes to heritage conservation. Then sustainable materials and construction techniques. This is looking at projects that surpasses the basic sustainability requirements and which champion heritage conservation. Then social impact. This looks at projects generating measurable social and economic benefits to their immediate surrounding communities. Heritage interpretation and education. These are looking at projects that excel in heritage interpretation and education. Heritage conservation research and development. These are projects prioritizing research and development in heritage conservation. Then resilience and climate adaptation. These are projects integrating climate resilience and adaptation strategies into heritage building conservation. Then heritage conservation leadership. These are projects that demonstrate exemplary leadership in heritage conservation techniques and practices. Then finally, innovative funding and financing models. These are projects employing innovative funding and financing models specifically for heritage conservation. And then last but not least, the integration of intangible heritage. These are projects integrating intangible heritage elements into physical building conservation. So to conclude, the incorporation of heritage conservation into existing framework of the Green Building Council of South Africa and the development of the Heritage Conservation Leadership Challenge present a step in revitalization of cities and communities. By integrating sustainable energy efficiency and resource conservation into adaptive reuse processes, the Green Building Council and this initiative, like these, can drive positive change in ensuring a more sustainable and vibrant future for South Africa's built environment. To end, embracing heritage conservation and adaptive reuse within the Green Buildings framework not only promotes responsible development, but also recognizes the intrinsic value of our architectural heritage in creating a sense of place and fostering social impact within South African communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Devin. If the
Building brigade, the old buildings, they are things, and we keep on coming up against people saying, no, you can't do this, or you need to use other materials, or it's too costly, etc. So thank you for the wonderful presentation. Thanks.
Professor Kumar just complimented your
Thank you.
your presentation. Are there any more hands, any more comments? Or I might be throwing a span of the words, but like often when it comes to grade twos, do find themselves in areas of urban sprawl,
Sure.
and where you start looking at reconstruction within these spaces. So I just want to understand education.
Sure. So I think on this point there is an intersection between heritage conservation and sustainability because of the point made, even mentioned by Ross now. We've got studies that now clearly show that even the newest 6-star rated green buildings will take almost up to 80 years to overcome the carbon emissions that it took to build those buildings. So intuitively, reusing, repurposing, and adaptively reuse the buildings obviously become the clear kind of, how can I say, championed way of using the built environment sustainably. So when looking at buildings to be of heritage significance, people only value a building and its heritage significance because of its sense of place and communities and getting kind of input from these affected parties that kind of come to the table. And so I think in how we address or approach these matters through this tool could be one way of overcoming matters like gentrification.
Because I mean, being from Joburg and looking at places like your Hillbros and all of that, they are grade 3 buildings, and they do anyone that can reminisce about the glory days, your Yeovils, walking in and being like, okay, cool, I am going to construct this and I'm going to apply this sustainable conservation methods, and then you suddenly have, a picture of gentrification. And yeah, that also adds on to we are giving that significance back to those buildings, but also then creating
Sure.
Yeah.
We don't have all the answers,
Yeah,
but
no,
I think it's
definitely.
a step in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank
That
you
was
so
very,
much.
very informative. And then on heritage conservation and sustainability, or sustainable development. Is that correct?
That's
Yes. Thank you very much, Devin. In the absence of any hands, I'm going to be moving on to our next speaker. And our next speaker is a SARA member, and that is Ms. Heidi Walden, who will be presenting on the thematic framework, which has been a project in the works for quite some time, including there has been, and that is basically just an overhaul of how we look at heritage. Ms. Heidi Walden is a heritage officer in the Heritage Protection Unit. She holds a Master's of Science degree from the University of the Witwatersrand. She's currently serving as a heritage officer in the Heritage Protection Unit here at SARA, where she is responsible for coordinating the formal protection of heritage resources at a national level. She's currently developing a national framework for the assessment of the cultural heritage significance of South Africa's heritage resources. Heidi has been working with various stakeholders to ensure an inclusive and dynamic conceptual tool that incorporates diversity of South Africa's rich heritage, and will be presenting the progress to this update. As stated, this has been workshopped previously, so Ms. Walden would like to hear how far the process is and any interesting developments. You now have the floor.
Okay, I'm going to share my presentation. Just give me a second. Sorry, it's not doing anything. Okay. Is it showing? Can you hear me now?
Not yet.
Okay. Try it again. My apologies.
There we go. You can just go into presentation mode. and we are all ears.
Okay, it's not showing, it's showing the wrong one.
Yeah. Well, it's just
Still the wrong one. Sorry, I'll get this right. Okay. Is it showing the full presentation now?
yes, there we go.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm just got my camera on just as to say hi to everybody, and everybody can see the face behind the voice. I am going to switch off my camera just for the ease of connectivity. But thank you very much for the introductions, and good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for being here with us today. So I just would like to make a little disclaimer before we start, that this presentation, some of you may have seen it and heard it before, and I do apologize for any repetition. The aim here today is really to give some feedback as to where we are and how we've progressed, and also hopefully to encourage further discussions around the themes that we would like to include into this document. To start off, I would like to give a little bit of a legislative context for the development of a thematic framework and some background to the project and where we are. So as we know, the National Heritage Resources Act governs the protection of our heritage resources, and it does this through an integrated and interactive system of management of the national estate, and this is done within the 3 tiers of government by way of the grading system as defined in Section 7 of the Act. Now, heritage resources are essentially those resources, and Devin spoke about it. He mentioned what is a heritage building? Is a building that has some significance or value. So heritage resources are those resources to which we assign cultural heritage value or significance. And in terms of the 3-tiered system, where the resource is protected and managed is determined by this identified significance. So all of this requires that there's integration and coordination across the tiers of government in the assessment of our cultural heritage significance. So in terms of this, SARA is mandated to establish the system of assessment or grading. And so in 2003, we published the grading systems and criteria regulations. These regulations were very limited, however, in the elaboration of the criteria and did not establish the coordination between the heritage authorities that is required to ensure an integrated system of management. Following these regulations, in 2004, SARA drafted a guide to grading in which a thematic chart was proposed to assist in the determination and assessment of cultural heritage significance. In 2005, further categories of themes were proposed and listed, and these were meant to be used together with the thematic chart. However, the chart and the categories were never published, and nor were they ever widely utilized in the assessment of cultural heritage significance. So following all of this, in 2007 and again in 2019, SARA reviewed its operational guidelines for declaring national heritage sites and specifically declared heritage objects or collections. And from that, the process of declaration relies on the use of a thematic framework and between the heritage authorities at the various levels. So following all of this, SARA is now in the process of reviewing the Section 7 regulations, those grading systems and criteria regulation published in 2003. And the development of a thematic framework is seen as an essential first step in establishing this coordinated assessment of heritage significance. Now, the aim of the document that we're working on now is for it to be an overarching or an umbrella framework, which can further be refined at a regional or local level. And it is hoped that this will then allow for the regional nuances to come through while still providing that uniform coordination. So just very, very quickly, what is a thematic framework? Well, a thematic framework, as the Amelie mentioned, is a conceptual tool for the evaluation of significance of a heritage resource. And it does this, excuse me, about the story and the activity around the resource rather than the type and the function. This framework needs to be a live document. Human beings, we are dynamic, we are changing, and so meaning also changes and evolves. And we need to have, and therefore heritage significance is also not static. Therefore we need themes and concepts that we can use, that we use to determine the significance, to be continuously interrogated and revised. Now, the aim of the document is not to be used as sort of a criteria against which to measure cultural heritage significance. Rather, it is meant to be used as a visualizing the significance of the resource and to inspire deeper consideration of the complexity of the resource's meaning and to allow for greater nuances to emerge in our understanding of the significance of the resource. So we are developing this framework through a highly consultative process, and we're doing this to ensure that it's an inclusive, dynamic, and functional tool, and that it represents and succinctly captures the diversity of South Africa's heritage landscape. It's also through these consultations, we wanted to create a sense of a greater sense of partnership with the users of this document, and that will ensure that the framework is widely understood and then therefore utilized. So in this, we held our first initial consultation workshop in June last year. This was a fairly broad consultation, challenged with stage 6 load shedding from Eskom on the day. However, it was we received extremely constructive critiques on the document. The workshop focused on a broad consultation with experts, government partners, and conservation bodies. And what we presented at the workshop was an amalgamation of the 2004 thematic chart and the 2005 categories of themes. And this was presented then in a sort of table format. And as I mentioned, we received extremely constructive critiques, and numerous changes were made to the document. Now, following this and following these changes, we've been having numerous focus group consultations, and the aim of these have been to delve deeper into various areas of interest. And these are still ongoing, and from these that we've had already, we've had further comments and suggestions, specifically around perhaps some of the wording in the document, and maybe adding some additions and to the themes and sub themes as to what they would examine. We've also been having internal consultations with our staff. That's been taken place periodically and has mainly been happening through the Grading and Decorations Review Committee, and they will continue to take place. We will also publish a draft document. Okay, so let's have a look at what the thematic framework looks like currently. As you'll see, it's not in a table. It is now represented in a circular format. And this is because it became quite clear that representing the themes in a table format led to the themes being read almost chronologically or in a hierarchical sense. So based on the US Park Service's 2000 revision of their thematic framework, the representation of the themes in a circle was considered. And this leads What I like about the circle is that it leads away from any sort of hierarchical reading or chronological reading. You can start reading it at any point. It also allows for the idea of overlaps between the themes to become a lot more visible. So if you look at these overlaps between the circles, that's all very intentional. So the reason why we need to represent these overlaps is because our human activity doesn't fit into one neat little box. Our stories crisscross the various aspects of our human experience, and so the overlaps and duplications are inevitable. These themes should be seen as a lot more, instead of just sort of static and set. They are fluid, they are dynamic, and they are very much intertwined. So hopefully, by presenting these themes in a circular format, we represent history in a more integrated and diverse and complex way. I just want to just point out one little typo that I've noticed. The South African innovations here should also include innovations and inventions. So please just bear that in mind. I apologize. Okay, so we've got the themes represented in a circular format, and then we've got 3 cross-cutting connections that run through all the themes and all the sub-themes. And these are the time, people, and place. So time, besides considering the time period in which an event took place, time also considers the process and the changes over time that led to how events or why events unfolded as they did. The same way as people obviously recognizes the people that were involved, but also the variety of the people that were involved in the events. It looks at the differences in terms of the experience, the perceptions of the event, and that's based, on the different races, ethnicities, class, and gender of people involved. It also considers the interaction between these differences and help to comprehend a fuller range of human experience and a varied history. Place, as much as well, considers the locality of the resource, but also about how events and experiences at a local, regional, and national level have both influenced and impacted each other. So in other words, events or decisions taken nationally have impacted a community locally and therefore influenced a decision that was taken regionally. A good example, and one that I always use, is the June 16 uprisings, where a local event in Soweto galvanized and influenced other regions across the nation. That was based, so the local event that took place in Soweto was based on a national decision that was taken for Afrikaans as a medium of education. So it's clear that these connections, the time, people, and place, collectively impact and influence historic events. The uniqueness of the time in which an event took place, the character of the location of where it happened, the perspective of the people, and the attitudes of the people that were involved, all shape the outcomes of the event and the long-term impact on society. So these crisscross through all the themes. Okay, so let's delve into the themes and look at what the themes consider and examine. Origins of Earth and Life theme. This looks at the development of the Earth and early life. And while it speaks to the scientific evidence, it also must include the various creation cosmologies, beliefs, and practices that stem from these. It also considers the formation of the Earth together with the mineral deposits and meteorite impacts, and all the various evolution and extension events that took place. In terms of the African origins of humanity, the development of modern human behavior is considered here, as well as the origins and development of humanity, the movements of these early human populations, and includes the social organizations, developments in technology and communication, linguistic developments, also the symbolic developments in symbolic representation is also covered in this theme. Again, we need to not only focus on the scientific evidence here, but also to consider the various beliefs around the development of humans. Peopling examines how the landscape basically was populated. It considers the movement of people, how people organize themselves both on the land as well as socially amongst themselves, and includes migration, land disposition, settlements, settlement patterns, social organizations, and hierarchies. Living heritage covers the concepts of cultural and social expression, artistic expression, knowledge systems, and sports, and the various sporting codes. I just want to make just to give a quick note on the terminology of living heritage versus intangible cultural heritage. The UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage defines intangible cultural heritage as the intangible aspects of cultural heritage, such as practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, and skills that are transmitted from one generation to another. And they are consistently being recorded by identity and continuity. Now, the National Heritage Resources Act defines the term living heritage in a very similar way as the intangible aspects of inherited culture, and includes cultural tradition, oral histories, performances, rituals, etc. And then we have the South African National Policy on Living Heritage. And this policy adopts the same definition as the UNESCO Convention, but it also prefers to use the term living heritage. And the reason it stated in the policy is that this provides for a greater emphasis on the dynamic nature of culture and the association of this heritage with both cultural continuity and social meaning. And so considering both the national legislation and the national policy both use the term living heritage, we will continue to use the term here in this framework. Okay, so the social, political, and governance theme looks at the developments of the South African political landscape, the events and activities that shaped it. Now, this ranges from political and government institutions, civil organizations, various movements, campaigns, and events that shape the public policy and those that have led to our current democracy. In terms of the socio-economic and agrarian and industrial developments, this looks really at South Africa's ability to sustain its populations and the economic activities to do that. And it looks like things from agricultural development, say from early farming and pastoral societies all the way through to commercial farming developments in various industries, technological developments, going from the developments of stone tools all the way through to the fourth industrial revolution. It's also covered in this theme is the experience of the worker and the labor issues as well. Our education heritage and the development of our education systems in South Africa, and the various forms of education that we have, from the indigenous knowledge systems, the faith-based and religious educations and stuff. It also looks at the various education disparities that took place in South Africa. Then to look at the South African innovation and invention, this looks at the South Africa's contribution to the development of knowledge, advancements, innovations and inventions, as well as discoveries in various fields. Now we talk about various fields, but it could also go back, so sort of go back in time, where it could also look at the various developments and inventions, such as, which links very closely to the development of humanity, where you're looking at various, say, the bedding and hafting, but also like mineral mining technologies and stuff that did develop as well. So it's not none of the themes that need to be considered as a time-based theme. And with that, I thank you, and yeah, I'm ready to answer any questions. Thanks, Emily.
That was a very great up and then go down.
No question here.
Noted. No, in the absence of any hands or any comments from my side, Heidi, firstly, well done on that presentation, and also just in the level of detail and thought put into it. It's quite impressive. And as you were speaking, well, not specifically to the framework, but it speaks to some of the issues that the framework aims to address, especially as far growing collections, as well as serial nominations, again, in respect to collections, and also just re-evaluating the significance of collections. Specifically declared collections right now in the national estate. There are some that claim a lot of firsts, and there has been also, when considering nominations, where there's been a question of what did you use to evaluate this, and what else have you considered, or who else have you considered to this picture? And that in some form has led us to sort of reevaluate as to when we do receive a nomination, or when there is a suggestion to look into a particular collection, that we start in seeing how that particular nomination can incite a lot more inclusions, for a little bit more of a rounded picture of the national estate. So thank you very much on that, and good luck with the rest of the process.
Thank you very much. May, first of all, I couldn't agree with you more. And the whole idea, one of the benefits of using a thematic framework to sort of look into and to think about the significance in a lot more detail and more depth, is that you also you're able to start seeing linkages between the various resources that we are declaring, for example, and it also brings out a lot more narrative. Sorry, there's a playback. Okay, thanks. I think through the use of a thematic framework, we will definitely be able to look at a more complex and a more complete picture of the narrative of our history. I also just wanted to ask that, if anybody would like to receive the draft document, I'm more than welcome to this via email, or I'm happy to set up individual meetings to discuss it in further detail if anyone is interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for that offer. Can I also suggest that you put your email in the chat box, just so someone can just grab it from that point. And thank you once again for a progress update on the excellent work that you have been doing. And now we come to the exciting part, Heritage Resources Information System. And this is an online management system, but also does various interesting and quite handy work as well, one of which is it being a repository of our national estate. With me, I have two of my colleagues, once again, from SARA, from the National Inventory Unit, who will be presenting on this matter. We have Jake Harding, who is the manager of National Inventory Unit. As a manager for the NIU, Jake is responsible for the development of the National Heritage Estate and the upkeep of SARAs. Jake comes from an archaeological, underwater, cultural heritage and museums background and is enthused research coordinator. Ethan is the inventory and research coordinator in the National Inventory mission. On that note, Ethan and Jake, you have the floor to tell us what to expect.
Much. Hi, welcome everyone. And to give you all a first look at the new system. So we've quite a bit of ground to cover, so let's get into it. So today's program, I'm just going to briefly talk to you about what the National Inventory Unit is for and what we do, moving on to the existing version of SARAS and what it is for and the functions that it serves, and then looking at the new SARAS and why the changes are being made to it, to Mr. Cotti giving a demonstration of the new version of SARAS, and then we'll move over to questions and answers. So, to get started, the unit. So the National Inventory is essentially a characterization of heritage resources within the country. It is created as per Section 3, and it's meant to, in simplified terms, be a list and characterization of all of the national, provincial, and heritage resources within the country, including sites and objects. So in order to do that, it's a little more complicated than just putting it onto a spreadsheet, and so we have SARAS. As Lumile said, SARAS is shorthand for the South African South African Heritage Resources Information System. It is an informatics platform that is hosted by SARA, and as such is a public platform. It serves several key roles. First and foremost, in terms of my unit's function, is as a heritage resource repository. And so what this means is that it acts as the home for all of the characterizing information for heritage resources in the country. Second, it serves as a collection management system. This allows people working within the heritage sector and working with these heritage resources to keep track and to adjust the information in order to stay current on these heritage resources. This can extend to the movement of objects in and out of the country or into different heritage sites and objects. Further, the site also acts as the integrated heritage management system. What that means is that it is the portal for engagement with heritage regulation and permitting for the country. So if you want to apply for permits or to get a comment or a decision based around some kind of activity that engages with heritage in South Africa, SARAS is your port of call. So what this means is that you have a multifaceted, complex platform that does many different things for a lot of different spheres of the user base. Now, SARAS has been around for over a decade at this point, and so it means that it has a lot of complex systems that sit behind it. As such, we are moving on to a new version, a more modern version of SARAS. So this just kind of characterizes some of the changes that are coming with SARAS 2.0. So why make these changes? Well, first off, SARAS exists on a web development platform called Drupal 7. Drupal 7 is a very mature platform, and it has a lot of development tools, but it is also quite venerable at this point. And unfortunately, it is coming to the end of its support life in November of this year. Now, what this means is that it will no longer receive development and security updates, and that is not acceptable for a public platform. As such, we are moving over to Drupal 9. And Drupal 9 is also an open platform like its predecessor, Drupal 7, but it is a lot more modern. It incorporates a lot of modern, it has been many different things over its use life. And so this means that it has certain vestigial functions and other inadequacies in its code that make changing other things on system fairly complicated. So a key part of moving on to the new system is that it frees up a lot of development flexibility. It means we can then be more reactive to the needs of the user base, and it means we can fix things that break a lot faster, and we can also avoid those breakages more effectively in future. The existing system of SARAS, as for any of you that use it with any kind of regularity, are familiar, has a fairly poor approachability. This means that if you're not using the site day in, day out, it can be difficult to make the site do what you want to do and find exactly what it is that you're looking for. it also creates further skills development overhead for bringing new people into the heritage sector. I remember when I was a student and I was presented with SARS for the first time, and it was incredibly opaque. So the intention with the new development is to make the site more intuitive, more engaging, and more open both to the heritage sector and to the wider public. Further, by being more responsive to the needs and feedback of the user base, it means that we're able to tailor the site to do what it needs to enable the heritage sector to do its work and to enable both development and effective heritage management within the sector. The existing version of SARS has significant hosting limitations. And what I mean by that is that it has limited bandwidth in terms of user base accessibility, and further that the storage for the system is administrated in-house by SARA IT staff. Now, this creates difficulties in terms of maintaining a stability on the system. It also means that by having a single bandwidth pipeline, it means if one member of the user base is uploading a large volume of supporting data for an application, for instance, that is felt by the rest of the user base because they're all sharing the same road in and out of the system. Now, to address this, we are moving over to a modern cloud hosting solution. And what I mean by that is that the system is then going to be housed in a broader database, in a broader hosting environment, which is distributed, still held within South Africa, but it means that the access to the system is a lot more distributed, and each user that is accessing the system is doing so in a concise bandwidth pipeline of their own. So it means you could be uploading as much data as you want. You're not going to negatively impact the provision of the service to any of the rest of the user base. There's a lot of things to say about changes to the new system, but it's really just easier to show you. So what I'm going to do is hand over to my colleague, Mr. Ethan Cottee, and he's going to show you some of the functions and some of what the new site feels and looks like.
Thank you, Jake. Let me just share my screen for a second. Should be there momentarily. While we wait for it to load, let me get started. Good morning, my name is Ethan Cottee. I'll be taking you through the demonstration of SARS 2.0 demo site and some of the key features, namely the front page,
Okay. Maybe experiencing a little bit of.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah.
But these things do
Jake,
happen.
can you do it on your side? Let's see.
Yeah.
Stop sharing. Let's see. Okay, we are back, and Ethan will be taking us through SARS 2.0.
I forgot. I'm looking at the. Oh, that's great.
So we
There you
need to go into.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the front page, a sleek new design. So while this is a demo site, so please mind the dust. Things will be changing. There are a few versions of the site, and this is the most stable one that we're presenting to you guys. Thank you for your patience. So once again, this is the demo site, the new demo site of SARS. Sleek new design. Please mind the dust. This is a demo site, so there might be a few hard edges, but we're hoping to work all of those out by launch. So some of the key features that I'll be going through are this is where you find the profile on the top. The application dashboard is here, and then also site tours. And then here are some of the tabs to navigate through the site. This being the home tab, you have applications, objects, sites. Much time, so we can't go into everything. So I'll just touch on a few things. Do we have time? Okay. Well, we can always circle back to certain things that people want to see. So something I want to draw your attention to is featured site, which will be changing to featured heritage. Featured heritage, which will focus on both sites and objects. And then we'll also have featured articles, which will be any notifications that need to go out. So if there's any updates on the site, Gazette notifications, any meetings that people need to be aware of or attend, you'll find all that information here. We move down to the site search, the search function. So you can search by the name, the province, the site type, declaration, and you also have this little mini map here. And if you click on the pins, it gives you a little drop down, a little pop-up of all the heritage routes. So SARA, in collaboration with as Resistance and Liberation, the routes will act as a travel guide through providing the historical and essential information for those sites when people wish to visit them. Added on, and this is an ongoing project, so we expect to have public engagement and to be adding to this site as the time goes on. So this is quite important. Once you guys start engaging site, please send us your feedback. We want to know everything that you're experiencing. If it's good, if it's bad, if it's ugly, we want to know about it. So there's different aspects that you can comment on. So site creation, usability, the interface, whatever you're curious, whatever you want to let us know about, please send us an email. We are more than happy to listen to your feedback. There are some participating authorities, namely Amalfa, as well as the Eastern Cape PRA and Heritage Western Cape. And this whole process has been funded by the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. And we are moving on. Let's do it this way. Just a brief snippet of tours. So this will take you across the site, highlighting some of the key features that I mentioned earlier. And now from there, we'll go to one of the sites. Once again, there's tours of the pages. There's a tour of the page. And we are on Robben Island site, which is one of the sites we've uploaded to the system. And some of the features that we have on this completed site is the overview. So site identifiers, the name of the site categories, description, the recording information, so who created the site and when. We also have, and one of them is cultural landscape, and you can action those through site actions. So some of the key features, some of the standard ones are field grading, which is more formal than field grading, which is informal, and then the condition and monitoring assessment, as well as dating. So those are standard, but because of the category which was reported here, and this is the information. This is how the information will be presented. You also have the location, so a pin on the map. You have you can upload KLM files as well as the site address. You also have the management of how the site is managed. The field rating, the official grading of the site, any declarations that have been appended, and you can download those, as well as the associated media. Next, we'll be looking at objects, and one I created earlier is this clock. So we have the general information on it, which is the site code, the common name for archaeological sites, but we'll be working on this to include more historical objects. The media movements. It also has actions. So these are movement and location. So any movement of the object might take in or out of the museum, if it's coming in, or if it's a conservation area. And then condition assessment is the object's conservation. What state is it in, and how what conservation techniques to use to conserve it. And from there, we'll move on to. So we've looked at sites, we've looked at objects, and now you want to know, how do I create these? So there is. We'll look at sites creation, and this is the web form. And these web forms are sort of templates, so they look quite the same. I might show you the template for objects as well. So for site creation, it's these two tabs, general and enable detailed mapping. And these are the highlighted bits is the necessary information that you need to include for you to be able to save this as a site. And then it's the site reference, the site name, its description, the site history, the location, all the tabs that I went through when I showed you the completed site. Here it is in the map, and you can pin where the location should be. The latitude and longitude is auto-populated through dropping the pin, as well as the location notes, reference, and any media or document that you need to append. We also have 3D models, but that is a placeholder because it is similar, but there are more tabs. So once again, the general tab with the general information that needs to be filled in, focusing asterisks as the minimum information that is required. We have description as well, once again, describing the object, its history, associated sites, and media. Once more, finally, we have applications. So this is the application selector. So previously, it has been brought to our attention that maybe applications could be a bit more streamlined. So we've done that for you. So these are the different types of applications you can choose from. And it's as simple as applying for a permit. You click here. You're applying for a permit in a site. So you're applying for a site permit in the Free State. You click next. And here are the forms, the relevant forms for that permit in that province. Let's click on SARA permit application for formally protected sites. You are presented with this window. And here is a progress bar. It tells you what part of the legislation that this permit is for. And there is a terms and conditions that you need to agree to before you can process onto to fulfilling in the application. Thank you. I think I need to give you your laptop back.
Yes.
There you go.
Right.
Perhaps stop sharing.
Right. So then I just need to cover the previous material and get to
Then answer those questions. So please continue posting the comments and questions in the chat box. Once Jake has went through the frequently asked question presentation, then we can then ask covered by Jake.
Okay. Why is it not progressing? There we are. Great. So with the new site, there's a lot of detail that needs to go into that in terms of explaining what goes into the system. And we get a lot of questions around the system and what are the salient important things. So I thought to get started on the question and answer section of our presentation, I'd cover some of that ground for us. So the first question that we get a lot is, when is this new system launching? And I am pleased to be able to say that the system is launching on Monday, the 15th of October. That will be when the fully launched, full-fat SARS is available for public use and will take over the functionality of the existing version. Just to characterize the launch cadence momentarily, the existing system will on lucky for me, and over that weekend we will be putting up the new version of the system and running diagnostics, running checks, making sure that the system is on its feet and performing normally. And then on the Monday, the website will be open to the public and will be fully functional. Now, the question that leads on to that is, where can I find the new system? So the new system will be found exactly where you found the old system. So from the side of the user, a URL, as shown in this slide. If you follow that URL up until Thursday the 12th, you will be brought to the existing version of SARS. Over the weekend, you will either not find a site, or you will get a pop-up saying that the site, that same URL from the Monday, it will bring you to the new system. So the URL, the site is in exactly the same place that you've always found it. It means you don't have to change any of your tracking. You don't have to change any of your presets on your browser. The site is exactly where you expect it to be. Now, post-launch, we're going to continue with the engagement programs that we currently have run and operate the site as they prefer. We also will be providing help desk and troubleshooting services. The nature of a launch for a system of this complexity means that people will have a lot of questions in terms of where they can find the right things on the site. And so we will be there to answer those questions. And finally, we are open to feedback. The nature of any kind of user-generated content platform and any form of platform of this complexity with a broad user base is that the functions of the site need to be driven by that user base. We are very keen to hear what you as the users of the site think of the system in its new iteration, and to provide guidance to us in terms of how we can improve the site and where the site isn't performing as expected. Now, as I've mentioned, there is an early access program for the site. So leading up to October the 15th, we are currently running an early access program, and go and try out the demo site for yourself. What you'll notice, however, is that you will not have a profile that exists in the system. And so that will limit your functionality with the system to going and looking at existing content. If you want to go and create applications and sites and objects of your own, then Ethan will also be putting in a link for my email address. Please contact me in order to what your thoughts are on this. And as I said, because it is a newer development site, because it has better, more modern, doesn't mean that the site can be all things to all people, but it means that we can certainly onboard that feedback a lot more effectively than in the past. Now, this early access program serves two different purposes. First of all, on the user side, it means that you, as the user, can develop your orientation and familiarity with the site, so that when system launches on the 15th, that you know exactly what it is that you're looking at. You know, you're able to find the different tools and the different functions that you need. On the development side, it gives us much needed feedback and many extra pairs of eyes in terms of hunting down the bugs and glitches that a system of this complexity inherently has at launch. So thank you for listening to us, and I would very much like to give over to Lumile to open up the floor to any questions that everyone might have.
Thank you very much, Jay. We will be taking hands and comments at the first look of SARS 2.0. Graham, I see your camera is from the NIU and some of their questions. So, I mean, their presentation. In the absence of any hands, I have a question that came about. So you spoke about one of the primary reasons for moving is basically in that way. Will a major overhaul of SARS be made to try and move it. And then additionally to that, yeah.
Okay, so to answer your first question around Drupal, so generationally, Drupal as a development platform has a kind of what's termed a leapfrog cadence. So the difference between Drupal 7 and 8 is significant. The difference between 8 and 9 is not as significant. I think in this instance, I think 9 and 10 is fairly similar. And so very relevant and very useful, right? The other thing that's nice with this is that Drupal 7 is experiencing the end of its use life, but at this point, it's, I think, almost in theory, in 2 years' time, will change that web platform.
Yeah.
Also, the overall ecosystem in terms of web development is very different now than how it was in 2010, 2013. And so it means that those platforms, there tends to be a lot of backwards and forwards compatibility with the kinds of coding language that goes into these. So it means that as a platform, Drupal 9 is, it's meant to last. And it means that this iteration of the system is envisioned to as the current version moving forward for quite some time. I think the other thing to note is that because the provider kind of glimpsed behind the curtain, there are 3 development versions of there's 3 development versions of the software that exists. So the demo version that is accessible as part of the early access program is the oldest and most stable version. I think it's current as of mid-August. There are 2 other versions which currently sit with the developer, which are accessible by the team. And so you wouldn't want the live version of Saris to be changing every day because update the user base in terms of, hey, this button that was over here is now moved over there. So the intention to set up a regular launch cadence. This is going to be driven both in terms of the nature of the development of the site. So in terms of how rapidly we can effect means that don't work, that sort of stuff. So that is part of the other part of the early access program. All of them plug into the system.